Welcome to our next episode of Future-focused CXO. Today we have a very special guest, Ken Rutsky. He is the Chief Marketing Officer of Aryaka. Aryaka is a leader in converged networking and security. Without any further delay, Ken, welcome to the podcast. Do you mind giving a quick introduction?
Great to be here, Jay and Steve. Excited to chat today. I guess the brief introduction is I've been doing this for a while. Let's just leave it at more than 2 decades. I'm a little bit of an old veteran, but one of the things that keeps you young is re-engaging. I've been through a lot of phases of my career, great stories, and a lot of learning. I'm excited to share that stuff with you.
Great. Let's get started.
Yeah, with all of our CXOs, we tend to find that they have a non-linear path to the C-suite. As you look back, what key pivots defined your career? What gave you the confidence to make the leap to get to the other side of that pivot?
Wow. If I go all the way back to the beginning of my career, I was a semiconductor device failure analysis engineer at IBM. IBM back then was going through a business transition, and I was living in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is not the most exciting place in the world, especially if you're 22 years old and single and right out of college, having left Chicago and end up in this company town in New York. I did learn to ski there. I have that, thankfully, because skiing became one of my passions and hobbies. But kind of bored. They made this offer. If you want to go become a salesperson, we can't stop you. Your manager can't stop you if you want to move to the field. And they called it the back to the field. So I was like, more of a decision on the basis that I was socially desperate to get out of Poughkeepsie. No offense if you're from there. It was a big leap because I went on quota. I could have become a systems engineer or a sales engineer, but I chose to go all the way. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to jump in with both feet. My father was a salesperson his whole life. So I said, okay, dad can do it. I can do it. I took a sales job and got in my car, drove from New York to Chicago, got an opportunity to go back to Chicago, and became an IBM salesperson. That lasted for about 5 years.
That's brave.
So I relate to that very much. I come also from a hardcore technical background. I used to be a C++ programmer. My change happened not so abrupt as yours, but in a very linear fashion, where I became an account manager, where I was doing farming, and I used to get only the bonus. Even though I bring $10 million extra business or $20 million business, I don't get any upside. Then I started figuring it out, saying, how can I make my efforts equal to my compensation? Like you, I went all in. I said, let me learn sales. Took a new logo sales business.
Yeah, that's what I had also. Same thing. New business.
And that taught me a lot. But
here's your territory, go sell something.
If you ask me, it taught me a lot of things and why I am here today. What were those changes which were most critical for you, which brought you here? What would you like to share from that experience?
It's a long, winding road, but I think a couple of the big pivot points were after 5 years of selling at IBM, I had an opportunity within IBM to take like a mini 2-year MBA course. They called it the President's Class, and it was for top performers to learn how to speak CEO language better or president language better. Halfway through that, the Wharton professors who were teaching it said, oh, every year, 1 or 2 people decides to go back and get their MBA. I was like, maybe that'll be fun. And maybe I can get out to Silicon Valley, which I had always thought that'd be fun to live in. So I took a flyer and applied to Stanford to get my MBA. Somehow I got accepted and have never left the Bay Area ever since. So that was a big pivot. Loved moving out to the Bay Area, loved the weather, loved the people, loved the community and the industry here. I ended up at Intel. That's a whole nother story. I got to choose my stories. I got so many of them. I ended up after business school working on the Intel Inside brand. It was a true marketing job. The other thing is I had a lot of opportunities after business school to take selling jobs. Some of them, by the way, would have made a lot of money. There was a software company that you might remember called Trilogy, did configuration management. They went huge. I got offered a sales job there. I'm like, I didn't go to business school to keep selling. I want to go do marketing. So I took this job at Intel. That worked out pretty well. The next big pivot was I was sitting in my cube at Intel, and one of my coworkers said, look at this job posting. I went over to her computer and Debbie, why does this company I've never heard of have a job posting on your computer? And she goes, it's this thing called the World Wide Web. I'm like, the what? That was a job posting for Netscape. And I knew nothing about Netscape. Netscape was probably 100 people at the time. And I did what you did then. I went into the library at Intel and did a LexisNexis search And I read about Jim Clark. I actually had known Jim Clark from Silicon Graphics. And then I read about Mark Andreessen and the Wonder Kids. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a pretty cool job. Once again, I fooled them. They chose me and I took a job there. So I had a good history of finding those opportunities. From there, it was a series of startups, a few successes, a couple of failures. After quite a few years and many adventures, I left after being acquired into McAfee, a company called Secure Computing. I got packaged out, which was fabulous. And I started looking around, take a little time off, looking around for my next gig. Took a consulting opportunity that one of my former Netscape colleagues, a guy named Greg Sands, who's now a well-known venture capitalist in the Valley with Costa Noa, a great guy, great firm. He introduced me to one of his portfolio companies. I did that, and then I got a second opportunity to do consulting, and I said, oh, this is fun. That lasted for 15 years. I built my own thought leadership consulting practice. One of my mentors in that world said something to me that really stuck hard. There's all different compensations in life. And one of the compensations I got from doing the consulting practice, besides making good living for 15 years, was a lot of flexibility to be very present for my 4 kids growing up. I don't know how you put a value on that.
You can't get
It's
that
just
back.
priceless. I got to 15 years. My son Owen, he's a senior in high school now. Most of the hard work of parenting, I think, is over.
It's never over until they are 25,
What?
26.
That's what everyone says. It's never over, at least most of the active part. So I had a client, my current CEO, Shailesh Shukla, here at Aryaka, called me to do some consulting work. I knew him because I had done consulting work at a previous job of his at a previous company. He said, we need some help with this. I said, great. I started consulting, and then he says, we're going to hire a CMO. I said, well, I'm not really interested. Then I thought about it for a while. I really like the opportunity, the people, the project. And I thought, okay, that compensation of free time, though I love it, is really not maybe as important to me. It became a challenge for me to prove to myself that after watching many of my clients succeed and some of them flail with the great advice I gave them, of course, all great advice. It was never on me. I decided maybe I needed to put my money where my mouth was, so to speak, and jump back into an operational role, prove that I could still do it. I wasn't really sitting on the sidelines. I think people think if you're consulting, you're sitting on the sidelines. I actually don't think that's true. I learned so much from so many clients, and you get great pattern recognition and learn a lot of things along the way. So I said, oh, let me give it a try. Here I am 18 months later as the CMO of Aryaka. It's been awesome. I'm having a blast, but it's been a big change. If you could design the perfect thing, it probably doesn't exist. It's been a great change for me personally, and I've really enjoyed it. So
It's a
pretty
great journey,
nonlinear.
man. A non-linear path. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of serendipity. My old wrestling coach in high school said luck is when preparation meets opportunity. There's a lot of truth to that. Thanks, coach, if you're listening. Not that you make your own breaks, because God knows I've seen a lot of people in the Valley get lucky and thought, that person really got lucky. Why isn't it me? It is the way it is, right? There is also what's your path and putting yourself in a position to find the opportunities and then having the, I don't know if it's courage or just foolishness to take advantage of those opportunities when they come in front of you. A lot of serendipity. I'm not the one who thinks you can plan your career. Maybe if you want to be a brain surgeon and you've wanted to be one since you were 6 years old, then you can plan that career. For most business people, flexibility, openness, and the desire to learn is really what I think
correct.
takes you along.
You find a way.
Yeah.
I get that.
One thing I do want to ask though, I went to Georgia Tech. We've all been to engineering schools, but there's a difference. Moving from engineering to sales, that's one thing. But you also worked at large organizations, very structured. Then you moved into something small like Netscape with 100 employees. What did you have to learn about yourself when you moved from this go do this, stay in this box, to there's no box, find all
Wear
the
the
answers
hats,
you
turn
get.
around.
Yeah, wear whatever you have to get it done. What did you learn about yourself there in the process that set the stage for a lot of your future success?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I went in and out of the box. It isn't always the size of the company. A lot of it's determined by the role. So in my first job at IBM, I did one thing. I did failure analysis on chips. My job was to take this chip, figure out why it failed, build a presentation slide, give it to my boss, and sometimes I got lucky enough to present it. It was fascinating work because it was technically really cool, and I got to use a scanning electron microscope and all that. but I was a tiny little thing doing a job.
Mhm.
That's fun because it was a really interesting job. Then when I took the sales job, as I said, it was a new logo job in an IBM branch office. Literally, I was a rounding error on a rounding error of IBM's results. They needed to sell 1 million new accounts globally, and my quota was 45. You feel like I'm this little thing and I don't matter. But again, the thing that was different with the first job at IBM and the second one is they also said, here's your territory, go figure it out. So I got to
Mm.
run my own little business. The
Ah.
only thing that really mattered at the end of the day was I was optimizing because they had a good sales plan on how much money can I make. My entire job was to sell stuff so that I made money. If I did that, nobody really cared what I did,
Mhm.
right? They did care, but they didn't care. I had a lot of autonomy, a lot of pressure that goes with almost running your own business, right? Then after business school, I go to Intel, and Intel is back to another semiconductor company. And I had a bigger job than I did in my first semiconductor job at IBM. As my boss Karen said, it's like a giant anthill here. We build a $7 billion factory and we have to fill it up and sell lots of chips. Everyone has the crumb that they move, and this is your crumb. That's depressing. But again, it was interesting work. It was like working on a big program in a big company that had more impact maybe than that little semiconductor failure analysis job, but you were part of a big factory. If anything, I think I would describe Intel when I was there, the company ran like a factory, right? The factory's job was to make chips and
Mm.
to sell chips. You had your part and you were part of it. From that, I learned that I didn't love that, right? I compare the IBM selling job to that. And while intellectually it was harder and more interesting, because I found sales is a challenge and it can be an intellectual challenge. I don't mean this negatively to salespeople, but it isn't, it's more of an emotional people challenge than it is an intellectual challenge. My job at Intel was super intellectually challenging, right? I really liked that, but I hated the regiment of it. I moved into the startup world and I found this job at Netscape. It was the best of both worlds because I got a lot of responsibility because the thing was growing so fast. I
Yeah.
showed up, there were 200 people. A year later, there were 3,000. That's
Mm.
like crazy. I learned that I can thrive in that kind of hyper growth environment because I love to do new things and learn new things.
Not everybody can handle going from a big structured enterprise to a startup. Many people fail. They get lost. They don't know what to do. There is no processes. There is no playbook. You just have
Right,
to do
right.
what is urgent for that hour, literally, and move on. People are not used to doing that. Great. I think you could learn that. And I believe that became the cornerstone for your solo consulting, what you really spoke about.
Yeah,
And
no question
I,
about it.
I wanted to go back to that for a second, because as we understood from your last conversation, you took that job to really prove to yourself that you can be back in the driving seat again. After
Yeah.
15 years, it is tough to get into it. And I think you are very successful back in the job. I would like to understand what would be those hardest psychological adjustments that you have to do from saying that I'm a consultant, judge me on my deliveries, versus now
Yeah.
I'm being judged on my team and my company's performance. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, as an executive in the C-suite, in some perspective, you're really judged on not even your team's performance. We're about $100 million company, so we have some scale, right? To be a successful executive, you're judged on whether the company succeeds, and it's
Mm.
almost a given that you better be doing your job. You don't get rewards for doing your job. You get to keep playing, right?
Yeah.
If you do your job well, you help to contribute to the corporate outcomes, which are at the end of the day what you're judged on. That was something that continues to be a learning for me,
Mhm.
right? It's a mindset shift away from I'm judged on my results to I'm judged on this thing called the corporation's results, regardless of what my results are. I talk to my team a lot about when we think about metrics. I always think about two kinds of metrics now. There are our operational metrics, which are what we need as a marketing team to do a better job. Then there are our strategic metrics, which really measures how do we contribute to revenue? How do we contribute to the corporate results that matter? New logo acquisition, revenue, all that matters. What doesn't matter to the corporation is marketing qualified leads or click-through rate. That matters a lot when you're running the programs, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day to the rest of the team, to the corporate results.
Let me ask you something. How did your solo consulting experience really help you to shape up to this conversation, saying what I'm doing matters to me as my metrics as a CMO, but for my corporate growth, strategic metrics matters, and I also need to deliver on that.
In the consulting practice, you have to do three things, right? You have to sell, you have to deliver, and you have to develop some level of defensible intellectual property. Correct. Whether that's thought leadership or methodology or positioning, right? Having to wear all three hats forces you in some ways to think about the business, not any individual. That was a really good project. I learned early on a couple things. I could have a great project, and if I didn't charge enough for it, it didn't matter. Like to me personally, like to my outcome of my practice. So I learned that pricing and value perception was super important. The other thing I learned is I could do great work, and if I didn't bring the client along with me, it would never get implemented. Then we feel really crappy. It wasn't satisfying when you do really good work or have really good ideas and you watch it sit on a presentation and never get implemented. About a year or two into my consulting practice, I had a client and I walked in our first messaging workshop. I blurted out maybe the best answer I ever had in my career. It was brilliant. To this day, I'm not going to say who the company is. They're still around. To this day, I'm convinced they would have had a different outcome. But because I didn't bring them along through a process to get to that answer, a couple of the people in the room just rejected it. Because there was no buy-in process, it never went anywhere. What I learned from that is, as a consultant or even as an executive, having a great idea is important, but the way you bring the team along, whether that's a client or the rest of your executive team, the rest of your team that you're managing, not through blurting out the answer, but leading through a co-creation process. That really became core to my consulting practice. I always would say, you don't hire me to do this, you hire me to help you do it with you.
Such a nice thing to say.
Yeah. If you don't do it, you're not going to own it. If you don't own it, you won't implement it. If you don't implement it, you won't get value out of it.
I'm going to steal that because we are a consulting company. That is a great statement to say, you didn't hire me to do it. You hired me to help you do it with you.
The other thing I would always tell people is the answer's out there. This is not a creation process. It's a discovery process. We're here to discover the answer together because you know enough. You know the answer. The problem is you don't know how to take it and make it an answer that you can execute on. That's what I'm going to help you with. In a lot of sense, when you're dealing with smart entrepreneurial people, internally or externally, they know so much. The average executive here probably has 15 to 20 years in the industry. There's so much knowledge. And so when we go do a product launch, I'm not going to know more about the product than our chief product officer. I know more about how to message and position the value. By the way, I don't know how to sell the value as well as our chief revenue officer. My job is to bring that together and make it work in the market and the go-to-market. That's very similar to the consulting stuff.
Let me ask you, as the role of a CMO, you mentioned even when we talked earlier that there's this storytelling framework. You mentioned here, I have to bring people along, we have to co-create, we have to do all these things. How has your perspective on story shaped the way you feel your way through as a CMO?
It's a funny thing because what I'm finding as a CMO is it's really hard to be intentional about story because you're so wrapped up in every day. What I try to do is find forcing functions where we retell the story again and we optimize and tweak with it. The first project I did was to build the go-to-market story here. That was when I was a consultant. We did a pretty good job, I think, and we've rode that story for the last 14 months. We're about to do a major new product release, and I'm using that to update the story, refresh the brand, and launch the project all at the same time. One of my perspectives is you have to find that point where it's the right time to pull up the storytelling chair, so to speak. You can't just change it. I knew that, right? Messaging is killed by too much change, but it's also killed by stagnation.
Both sides.
That's
So
the
you have to have
challenge,
a balance.
right?
Yeah.
There's
Wow, that is a very nice
necessary
thing as well to
tension,
know.
which is what attention makes a good story.
The knowing when is, and finding those business forcing functions to tell the story again. I always like to use the campfire as the storytelling metaphor, right? I've never used this one before, but I'll try. It's like when people are in the swimming hole and they're having a great time, you're not going to get them around the campfire to listen to a story. But when you want to wind the kids down and they've eaten and they've got that slow because all their bellies are filled, that's a really good time to tell a story. If you're telling a story to the adults, better be a different story, by the way, get them drunk and then they'll love your story. Right?
I like that.
So,
Happy
yeah,
hours can get so far for you, right?
I think that scene and setting is important in a story, but it's also important in storytelling, the timing. And I think that's one of the things I've learned in an operating role. Timing matters so much. The timing, to a large extent, is dictated by things that you can't control, but you have to find a way to get in sync with. You can't control the rhythm of the quarter, right? The quarters happen, the quarters come, the quarters go. There's nothing you can do to change that. And so you don't want to roll out a new story or a new initiative 2 weeks before the end of your business quarter, right? So you have to
Yeah.
adjust your storytelling and your rhythm also to that business metrics. Unpredictable things happen, like whether it's a change in the visa policy or a competitive acquisition or a new product initiative that the product team comes up with. You got to figure out what is that universe you're living in and what's the rhythm of it and how do you match your storytelling to that.
When to tell the story is very critical, right? If you apply it to our sales, many times what happens is we have been continuously told that don't sell features, tell story.
Right.
Some of the salespeople I've seen, you're on the first call with the customer. You don't know him much, and customer wants to know, can you do this for me? Do you have capability to do what I want? That is in his head. It doesn't have much patience. And at that time, if you start telling him a story, saying how some other customer transformed his business and achieved $100 million ROI because of your product, it's not going to go well. That's not the right time to tell the story. That would be a good correlation to really think when to tell what story in the sales process.
Yeah, again, it goes to knowing your audience. One of the things I like to say is us marketing people, we're like classical musicians, right? We write a story or we write something and we want to say it the same way every time. We strive for perfection. Great salespeople that I've known, they're jazz musicians, right? They know the story, they know the score, but they also know how to read the audience and riff, entertain and succeed because they're in sync with the buyer. In that scenario, the buyer says that. Obviously, the answer is yes, we can do that. Why do you want to do that? Right?
Yeah, correct. Let's go there rather than
Yeah.
talking about something.
Tell me the
course, I think
story
we
of
do that.
why you want to go there, right?
Yeah, tell me more.
I'm very curious to know, with so much of technology change, especially GenAI that has come in, the whole marketing, what we have seen with a lot of our customers, this top of the funnel is really been shaken, right? The SEO is dead, as people keep saying. Everybody's searching on chatbots. How do my content come in chatbot? How does that guy know this is my content? Because it is paraphrased, completely rewritten.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how does this storytelling typically changes in this technology age? What would be your views on that?
I think a couple things strike me as true. One is that it's still people selling to people. We know that story motivates people. Even people like engineers who say they don't want a story react to a story, right? That's one thing to keep in mind. And that's why I'm skeptical about fully automated AI salespeople. Until they're selling to fully automated AI buyers, then maybe the story won't matter. But I think for the foreseeable future, people are still doing the buying, even if the AI agent is doing the research. The second thing is, it used to be that the big challenge in marketing created such a surge was creating good content, right? You can remember the book Content Rules by Ann Hadley, bestseller. Everyone was like, what's your content marketing strategy? Are you building the right content? First of all, very few people create content. They generate content now, meaning they use AI tools. And if you're good at it, you can generate great content. You can't just say, AI, write this. I'm doing a whole panel in a couple weeks on this topic, by the way, so I've been thinking about it. The challenge is not content creation anymore. The challenge is content activation. What I mean by that is you can create the greatest content in the world, but if it sits on your website, it's not discovered. To your point, some of our discovery techniques don't work anymore. If it's not discovered, even then, if it's not consumed, then you haven't activated it. It doesn't matter how good it is. The content activation, whether it's activating that sales enablement content for your selling team, or whether it's activating buyer journey related content for buyers, or whether it's activating investor content for potential investors, it's really creating the content simple. My team can't stand me because I can create content so fast. I've never in my career been in a marketing organization that wasn't hungry for content until now. Now the marketing organization is like, oh my God, you're burying me in content. How do I get this into growth programs that work? How do I get it discovered? So it's really changed that aspect of marketing in my mind. There's still a skill of creating great content. And that relates to storytelling, by the way. With AI content generation, the content is as good as the context that you use to create it. You can create really shit content too, right?
Oh, we can.
And I've been guilty of that at times because I'm in a hurry, right?
I'll tell you, with AI especially, prompt engineering is very important. For prompt engineering, you need context and you need experience. So you can work with AI in creating marketing content versus we can work is very different, even though the AI is same.
Yeah.
Same tool.
I'll tell you a little story about that, Jay. Our SEO and now GEO agency, we were chatting with them and I said, look, we need to be found for this topic. They said, okay, that's great. You need some content. I said, that's great. I'm ready to write it. How do I optimize it? They said, are you using AI? Yeah, I use AI. I've got to train, blah, 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 blah. Let me share my prompt with you. The prompt was 4 pages long.
Oh, wow.
Not only was the prompt 4 pages long, it had an embedded prompt in it, which was use this author profile, which was a 2-page prompt to create my author profile before I used the prompt to build the article. Here, I was so proud of myself for writing 2-paragraph prompts. It really opened my eyes. Now, do I think every prompt should be 4 pages long? Probably not. It was eye-opening to see if you really want to optimize a piece of content for findability, you can get into this entire minutia of how do you optimize it and how do you tell the AI to do that better by creating this massively long, it might have been 3 pages. I don't know if it's 3 or 4 pages.
That's fascinating.
It's just unbelievable.
I heard a journalist talking about how the first page is where all the learning happens. It's writing the first draft. Editing the page that AI wrote for you is not where you learn things. The learning doesn't have the depth that you have of doing marketing for this long, for decades, as you said.
That worries me about the next generation of our youth. Like I worry about
thinking that the best prompting might be 4 pages long. That's a whole first draft, right? You have to be able to write the thing to build the context and the structure so that you can train this AI to build this thing faster or build a persistent amount of content over the next few months correctly, more right the first time.
Then I got into this, you write a prompt to ask for AI to write a prompt, right? I mean, it's like,
there's that too.
Now you're in the hall of mirrors. But what I worry about for the next generation of our youth is like, I can do a really good job with ChatGPT because to your point, I bring 20 plus years of context to the conversation I have. How do you train the next generation of people to be good at that? I wrote an article. Otherwise, we're all going to end up like Wally World, sitting in our loungers, getting fat and letting the AI do everything.
A kid growing up with a smartphone has no understanding what it looks like to have to learn email. The people he's selling to that buy from his company had to go through it like we did. One day we had to figure out how to do email and learn how to text and get a cell phone that flipped open and then replace it every 6 weeks.
So I think we've got some real interesting disruption. Obviously, everyone talks about the disruption, but I worry about how do we train the next generation of marketers to be great marketers? How do we make the jobs challenging but meaningful?
The question is going to be, are you going to train a person or train an AI? to be the next marketer, right? We don't know that.
Then what are the people going to do?
They're not going to buy things because
Oh man,
Yeah.
I don't.
Well,
I
I'd
mean,
love to ask you about
we're
this.
in the true AI rat hole now.
As you were going through it, somebody mentored you. Somebody
Yeah.
coached you well. As you're thinking, what are the next generation going to do? Can you just share a quick moment on what changed the trajectory of your leadership by good mentoring or a good coach, somebody coming alongside you and really helping you? Let's go this way.
One thing sticks out because it's advice I give to younger people all the time today. I was debating between two job opportunities at Netscape. They were really good opportunities, both of them. It's a great problem to have when you have two good opportunities in front of me. I went to the CMO, Mike Homer, the late Mike Homer, who was probably one of the smartest people I ever worked for. I said, Mike, and I was in his organization. I'm like, Mike, I can do this job. I don't even remember what the two jobs were. I don't know what to do. He said, what job do you want after that? I said, what do you mean? I go, I want one of these jobs. He goes, yeah, but what do you want to do after? What would the next job look like after that? I said, why? He goes, you should take the job that's going to get you to the next job faster. And I thought that was like such a great piece of advice. Anytime someone comes to me with that, unless I'm choosing between two CMO jobs, that's a whole different discussion. I'm trying to decide if I should be the director of growth marketing at this company, or if I should make a little pivot and be the director of customer marketing at this company. What do you want to do next? Do you want to be a CMO? Here's what I think, the weighting of those two. What does your career path look like before? And where do you see it going next? What skill gap or capability do you need to prove to the market that you have to get that next job? So that was a really pivotal job. I ended up taking more of a product management job. I had never done product management. I've never done it since, but it was a great experience. And I know it taught me how to manage projects and how to think about the product manager. It served me well.
That's awesome.
Mike, wherever you are up there, great guy. Taken too soon.
We usually end on what advice you would give, and I think that's fantastic for anybody coming up looking to be a CMO one day. What's going to get you to the CMO faster? What's going to give you the kind of experience you need that makes you able to keep the roles you're getting into?
We all know it's very few roles where specialization gets you to the top in business. It's not like brain surgery, right? I'm like the guy who does this brain operation in the world, and I get paid a ton for doing that because I save people's lives. Even an engineering job, I did infrastructure engineering, but I've never done the application layer. I want to be the VP of engineering, or I want to be a general manager one day. Don't take another infrastructure engineering job. Take the one you haven't done. It goes beyond CMO. It's like thinking executive C-level business jobs are, for the most part, the multi-hat job, even within the specialty. Which hat do you need to wear next?
One thing that stuck with me, I would like to add into this advice piece is definitely what you said. There are two types of metrics to live with. The metrics of your team and what your role is, and strategic metrics of your organization. That mindset is very different of a C-suite versus a normal employee. You have to build that mindset, right?
Yeah, no, metrics matter so much. Both of them matter a ton. Understanding when you need to focus on which one and the interrelationship between them.
Thank you so much, Ken. It was very insightful talking to you. A lot of the things we have unpacked. Viewers, if you're enjoying this, follow us. If you have any questions, reach out to Ken on his LinkedIn profile. When we publish this, we definitely will include or tag him onto it. He would be happy to connect with you, answer any of your questions. Any last words before we close the podcast?
Thank you. I enjoyed it. It was a nice trip down memory lane and a look into the future a little bit. We can do this anytime. I had a blast. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ken.